The check was so small it barely made a sound when it hit the table, but the laughter that followed it, that filled the entire room. To my beloved wife, Maya Seo-Carter, I leave the sum of $20. Maya didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just looked at the check and thought, $20? After everything my son sacrificed. What are you going to do with that, Maya? Frame it? The lawyer's voice dissolved into the lacquered air like smoke. Maya's vision narrowed. The conference room tilted. $20. 5 years of marriage. 1 daughter. A man who had loved her so stubbornly. His entire family spent those 5 years trying to undo it. $20. Yet that was what the law said she was worth. That was what they had decided together, on paper, in this room that smelled of wealth and certainty and the particular satisfaction of people who had been waiting to win. Hyun-ja Seo's laughter moved through the room like perfume. Invisible, expensive, impossible to ignore. She sat in cream silk, a single strand of diamonds at her throat, pressing 2 manicured fingers to her lips as though trying to contain herself. She was not trying to contain herself. $20, she said, in English so precise it was its own kind of cruelty. After all my son gave up, after all we offered him. Jae-won, Daniel's older brother, tilted back in his chair with the ease of a man who has never been uncomfortable in a room. What exactly are you supposed to do with $20? Maya? His smile was almost kind. Buy Soo-yeon new shoes? Put it toward next month's rent? He wasn't angry. He was entertained. That was the part that cut the deepest. At the head of the table, Chairman Seo Byung-il said nothing. 76 years old, back straight as a ruler. Mouth pressed into a line that had not changed since the first day Daniel brought Maya to their home. The day Hyun-ja excused herself early, the day Jae-won shook Maya's hand without looking at her face, the day the chairman studied her across the dinner table like a problem he hadn't yet decided how to solve. He still hadn't spoken. He didn't need to. She had been the wrong answer to a question they never wanted asked. A black American girl from a working-class home in Atlanta with oil paint perpetually under her fingernails and the particular kind of confidence that comes not from money, but from knowing exactly who you are. They had never forgiven Daniel for choosing her. Not at the engagement dinner. Not at the wedding Hyun-ja attended in dark gray, like she was mourning something. Not after Soo-yeon was born and Daniel called his mother from the hospital at 2 a.m., voice cracked open with joy, and she said, "Congratulations the way you say it to a stranger." They had never forgiven him, and now he was gone, and they were finally quietly getting everything they'd wanted. Maya could feel it, not in anything they said, in the air itself. And the particular stillness of people who have been patient for a very long time and are now watching the clock run out. Behind her, Soo-yeon shifted in a chair that was too large for her small body. She had dressed herself this morning with enormous seriousness. Her navy dress, her white tights with the small bow at the ankle, her hair in 2 careful puffs that Maya had redone 3 times because Soo-yeon kept asking if she looked nice enough. For what, baby? For the important meeting. She was 4 years old, and she had understood, in the wordless way children understand everything, that today mattered. Soo-yeon's hand found Maya's under the table. Small, warm, certain. Maya held it and said nothing, hoping, praying, that whatever she was feeling didn't travel through her skin and into her daughter's palm. Her hands had been cold since Daniel died. He used to warm them, pulling them to his chest when she complained, making Soo-yeon laugh by calling himself a hand-warming machine, pressing his mouth to her knuckles and saying, "They're fixed." No one touched them now. She was still holding Soo-yeon's hand when the lawyer, James Woo, a quiet man in his 40s with careful eyes and no apparent interest in performing for the room, cleared his throat and slid the check across the polished table. $20, signed, legal, notarized, final. There must be something else, Maya said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. The accounts, his workshop. He was working on patents. He told me the accounts were restructured 18 months ago, James said carefully. Hyunja's expression didn't change. It didn't need to. Maya had known this family for 6 years, had learned to read every silence. This one said, "We already knew that. If you're already hooked by this story, don't forget to subscribe, because you wouldn't want to miss what happens next." She couldn't go back upstairs. Couldn't go home either, not to the apartment that still smelled like Daniel's coffee, where Soo-Yeon's drawings were still taped to the refrigerator in the particular crooked way of a 4-year-old who takes her art very seriously. So she sat in James Woo's car in the parking garage beneath the building, the engine off, the overhead fluorescent light casting everything in the color of exhaustion. Soo-Yeon was in the back seat, asleep before they'd even reached the second level, her cheek pressed against her stuffed rabbit, unbothered by the fluorescence. The unbothered by everything the way only children can be. James had the file open across his lap. He wasn't reading it urgently. He was studying it. The careful, unhurried attention of a man pulling at a thread he wasn't sure of yet, following it slowly so it didn't break. "The check," he said finally. "What's the number on it?" Maya pulled it from her purse. She'd folded it twice, as if making it smaller made it less real. She unfolded it now and looked. 0411201. April 11th, 2010, James said without hesitating. Maya went still. "Does that date mean anything to you?" She looked at the number again, at the way the digits sat there, plain and deliberate, hiding in a sequence that looked like nothing until it looked like everything. April 11th, 2010. Her mother's Korean language class. A Saturday morning. Maya had been helping set up chairs when the door opened, and a man walked in. Early 30s, earnest expression, a volunteer translator who had clearly underestimated how nervous he would be. He sat across from her at the registration table and said, in careful, imperfect English that suggested he was translating from a thought he'd had in Korean first, "I think I'm going to know you for a long time." She had laughed. He had turned red. She had handed him his volunteer badge anyway. That was Daniel. "That's the day we met," she whispered. James nodded slowly like he'd already suspected as much. He turned his laptop toward her. A property record. A parcel of land 40 minutes north of the city, registered 3 years ago, under the name Maya Seo-Carter. Maya stared at it. That's impossible. The registration date is right here. 3 years ago, we were 2 months behind on rent." Her voice was flat with the particular certainty of someone who has memorized their own financial pain. He was working the engineering job and picking up weekend shifts at his cousin's firm. He didn't have money for property. He didn't even have money for... She stopped. "He told me we couldn't afford to fix the heating unit." "I know. So how... I don't have all of it yet." James closed the laptop carefully. "But the paper trail is real, the registration is real, and the check number is not a coincidence." He paused. "Your husband wasn't hiding this from you, Mrs. Seo-Carter. He was hiding it for you." The distinction landed somewhere behind her sternum and stayed there. She looked at Soo-Yeon in the rearview mirror, still asleep, rabbit tucked under her chin. She called Mrs. Park. The woman answered before the second ring, which meant she'd been waiting. "Maya, are you all right? Where are you? I need you to watch Soo-Yeon, a few hours, maybe more." A pause, then, "I'll be here. And Maya?" Mrs. Park's voice shifted into something careful, like she was setting down something fragile. "Daniel called me. About 3 weeks before he called me and asked me to promise that if anything ever happened, I would look after you both. He was very specific about it." The garage was very quiet. He knew something was coming. "Thank you," Maya said. "I'll explain when I can." She hung up, sat with it for a moment, then looked at James. "Let's go." They drove north. The city loosened around them, traffic thinning, buildings giving way to tree lines, and the road narrowing into something that felt less like a route and more like a direction. Maya watched the trees grow taller through the passenger window and said nothing. Daniel had built something, in secret, in the margins of a life that looked like barely enough. He had built something and left her a map disguised as an insult. She didn't know yet what she was about to find. She only knew she was terrified it wouldn't be enough to save them, and more terrified that it would, because that would mean he'd known, all along, that she would need it. The GPS lost signal 2 miles before they arrived. James drove on anyway, following the property coordinates from memory, turning onto a gravel road that didn't appear on any map Maya could find on her phone. Trees formed a canopy overhead, oak and pine, dense and unhurried. Sat the kind of growth that takes decades. Afternoon light fell through in long, broken columns, striping the road gold and shadow. Then the trees opened, and Maya stopped breathing. It wasn't a cottage. It wasn't a modest investment property or a plot of undeveloped land. It was a house. No, an estate. 2 stories of dark timber and pale stone set back from the road like it had always been there, like it had grown out of the ground the same way the trees had. A wraparound porch, tall windows catching the last of the afternoon sun, a garden along the front that someone had tended recently or had designed to tend itself, and the door, deep crimson. The precise shade of crimson that Maya had painted the accent wall in their first apartment 7 years ago, before the money got tight and she'd had to paint over it in landlord-approved beige. Daniel hadn't complained. He'd just stood in the doorway of the empty room afterward with that particular expression she'd never been able to name. Not sad, exactly. More like noting an absence. He had remembered. Of course, he had remembered. James parked, and neither of them moved for a moment. "Did you know?" he asked quietly. "No." The word came out barely audible. "I had no idea." They got out. Gravel shifted under their feet. James crouched at the base of the front steps and ran his hand along the stone border until he found one that moved. A loose flat stone, third from the left. Beneath it, nestled in a small hollow, a brass key, slightly tarnished, warm from the sun, even in the shade. Daniel's hands put this here. The thought arrived fully formed and devastating. He crouched exactly where James is crouching. He hid this. He meant for me to find it. Her hand was shaking when she took it. The door swung open into light. One large open room, the far wall almost entirely window, the late sun pouring through in wide panels that fell across hand-carved furniture. A dining table, chairs with curved backs, shelves fitted seamlessly into the walls. A child's rocking horse in the corner with a mane carved in such intricate detail it seemed like it might shake its head if you looked away. A small writing desk near the window, and burned into its surface in careful block letters, Su-Yan. Maya pressed her hand over her mouth. On the walls, her paintings, the ones from her final year of art school. The large abstract in ochre and deep blue that she'd rolled and moved 3 times before it disappeared in a chaotic apartment transition 4 years ago. And the small portrait series she'd assumed were lost, framed, properly matted, hung at exact heights as if someone had spent real time deciding where each one belonged, hung like they were worth something, like she was worth something. The sound that came out of her wasn't a sob. It was quieter than that and worse. James said her name softly. She held up one hand. "Give me a moment." And he did. On the center table sat a metal lockbox, dark brass, engraved across the lid in Daniel's handwriting. "For my girls." Beneath it, a folded note, also his hand. She recognized the slight leftward slant of it, the way he pressed too hard on consonants. "They will try to take this from you. Don't let them." Beside the box, a small envelope, her name on the front. Inside, A brass key, small and cold, and a single folded page. Maya, if you're reading this, and I'm gone, I'm sorry. Open the box, then fight like hell. Forever yours, Daniel. Her knees gave. James caught her arm before she went down, steadied her without a word, held on until she nodded that she was all right. She wasn't, but she was upright, which was close enough. She fit the key into the lockbox. The lid opened. Inside, a sealed manila envelope, a leather journal worn at the corners, a second key, tagged with a small label, Riverside Trust, Box 12, and a USB drive, black, with 3 words written across it in silver marker. The truth. They sat at the kitchen table Daniel had built. Maya knew he'd built it because she could see the tool marks along the underside of the edge, the small, deliberate imperfections of handwork that factory furniture never had. She ran her thumb along one while James spread the contents of the manila envelope across the surface. Documents. Formal, stamped, dense with legal language. Company names she didn't recognize. Tech firms, a materials engineering consortium, something called Bridgepoint Innovations, LLC. Transfer agreements. Compensation figures that her eye kept sliding past because they didn't seem like numbers that belonged in her life. James arranged them by date, oldest to newest. 4 years of transactions, each one building on the last. Then he found the trust document and went quiet. He read it once, then again. The Maya Seo-Carter Trust, he said carefully, like he was making sure of every syllable. Irrevocable. Established 4 years ago. He turned the page toward her. Current value, $1,940,000. The kitchen was very still. They can't touch this, James said. Not the family, not creditors, not a civil claim. It's structured specifically to withstand legal challenge. He set the page down. Maya, he built you a wall. She looked at the number until it stopped looking like a number and started looking like years. Like 2 jobs and skipped dinners and a heating unit they couldn't afford to fix. Like Daniel at the kitchen table of their apartment at midnight, laptop open, telling her he was finishing a work project, and she'd brought him tea and not asked questions because she was tired and she trusted him. He hadn't been finishing a work project. She picked up the journal. His handwriting filled it from the first page. Sketches, technical diagrams, a margin notes in the mix of English and Korean shorthand he used when he was thinking fast. Timestamps going back nearly 5 years. She recognized some of the designs vaguely, things he'd mentioned in passing as side interests, nothing serious. She hadn't pushed. She hadn't known to push. His letter was folded into the back cover. My father offered you money to leave, twice. The first time was before Soo-Yeon. The second was the month after she was born. I found the bank records he thought I wouldn't find. I never told you because I didn't want you to carry that. Maya set the journal down, picked it back up. Jae-won told me I was wasting everything on someone who would never belong in our world. I told him belonging was not something I needed his permission to define. He didn't take that well. None of this could be in your name while they were watching. The moment they knew there were assets, they would find a way to claim them through the corporate structure. So I built it quietly. Everything I invented, everything I sold, every dollar went into the trust. For you. For Soo-Yeon. I'm sorry I carried it alone. I didn't know how to protect you and tell you at the same time. James was reading over her shoulder now. She didn't stop him. She turned to the final pages. The handwriting changed, tighter, more compressed, the pressure heavier on the page. James took the journal gently and read aloud. If something happens to me, don't believe it was an accident. Jae-won cornered me last week in the parking structure at work. He said I was destroying the family's legacy, that I was making myself into a problem. That some problems had to be handled before they became permanent. James stopped reading. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Maya had ever sat inside. She was still sitting in it when she heard the gravel. She looked up through the tall kitchen window. A black SUV moving slowly up the drive. It stopped. The door opened. Maya Seo stepped out. Two men behind him, broad-shouldered, unhurried, the kind of men whose job description lived in the space between a threat and an action. Maya looked at the house, then up at the window, then directly at Maya. He smiled. Small, certain. The smile of a man who has never arrived anywhere second. Then he raised his phone slowly to his ear. Daniel spent 4 years building Maya a fortress in secret, and Jae-won just found the front door. At what happens next is the part they never planned for. If you need to see Maya fight back, subscribe. Their next chapter is where everything they tried to take becomes everything she uses to bury them. James's phone rang before Jae-won's hand came down from his ear. James answered it on speaker without being asked. A courtesy or an instinct. Maya wasn't sure which. Mr. Wu. Jae-won's voice was calm and surgical, the tone of a man who has made unpleasant calls before and learned to enjoy them. I think we should discuss what belongs to Mrs. Seo-Carter and what belongs to this family. This property belongs to your brother's estate, James said, which means it belongs to his wife. The purchase was funded through a SEO Corporation subsidiary account. That makes it a corporate asset. A pause. You're welcome to dispute that in court. It will take approximately 3 years and cost more than the property is worth. Or, it's a lie, James said flatly. It's a filing. Jae-won's voice didn't change. Already submitted, as of 40 minutes ago, along with an emergency restraining order against Maya Seo-Carter. Effective immediately. She is currently in violation of it. Another pause. The police have been notified. James was already opening his laptop one-handed, phone wedged to his ear. Maya watched his face, watched it confirm what she didn't want confirmed. Judges move quickly, Jae-won said pleasantly, for the right families. James looked at her. The restraining order was real, filed an hour ago. One more thing, Jae-won continued, and his voice softened in a way that was somehow worse than the surgical tone. My mother filed an emergency custody petition this morning. Unstable widow. No income, no permanent address, now trespassing on disputed corporate property while making serious allegations against a grieving family. He let that settle. The petition writes itself. The line went dead. Maya was already moving. Back door, James said. He didn't have to say it twice. They grabbed everything, the documents back into the envelope, the journal, the USB drive, the lockbox under Maya's arm. James killed the laptop and shoved it into his bag. 30 seconds, maybe less, and they were through the kitchen and out the rear door into the tree line behind the estate. The woods were dense and immediate. Branches caught at her sleeves, her hair. The ground was uneven, roots and damp leaves, and she ran anyway. Following James's hand, pulling hers forward, her lungs burning in the cold air, the lockbox knocking against her hip with every stride. Behind them, somewhere around the front of the house, a door slammed. James didn't look back. Neither did she. They broke through the tree line onto a narrow service road, barely wide enough for one vehicle. A gray sedan was parked at the shoulder. James's second car, left here the way a careful man leaves things just in case. He had the engine running before she got her door closed. In the side mirror, one of Jae-won's men emerged from the trees at a run. He stopped when he saw the car pulling away. Watched them go. They drove in silence for 2 minutes before Maya's phone rang. Mrs. Park. She answered immediately. Maya! The woman's voice was tight in a way Maya had never heard from her. A woman came to the door 20 minutes ago. She said she was from Child Protective Services. She wanted to take Soo-yeon for a welfare check. Maya's blood went cold. I didn't open the door. I told her to come back with documentation, but Maya... Mrs. Park's voice dropped. She knew things. Soo-yeon's full name, her age, the preschool you applied to in the fall. Where is Soo-Yeon right now? Right here with me. She's fine. She's eating crackers. A breath. But Maya, where are you? She's still outside. She's waiting. Dr. Grace Lim's safe house was a third-floor apartment above a dry cleaner in a neighborhood nobody would think to look. Small, clean, deliberately unremarkable. She met them at the door with no questions and 2 sets of keys. Maya got Soo-Yeon upstairs first. The child had been awake for too many hours and had asked, twice, whether the lady outside Mrs. Park's door was the mean kind or the normal kind. Maya had said normal kind with a steadiness she didn't feel. Now Soo-Yeon was tucked into the narrow guest bed, rabbit under her chin, a small nightlight projecting slow-moving stars across the ceiling. She was asleep in under 4 minutes. Maya stood in the doorway watching her breathe. Then she went downstairs and opened her phone. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was steady, which was the only combination that mattered right now. She drafted it plainly, the way Daniel used to say she painted, no wasted strokes. My name is Maya Seo-Carter. 4 weeks ago, my husband Daniel was killed. His family left me $20. This is my story. She attached the image of the check, and 3 pages of patent transfer agreements, a 30-second clip from the USB drive, just enough to hear Jae-won's voice, flat and businesslike. I need it handled before he moves those assets. She pressed post. It felt like a gunshot. The recoil was immediate. By midnight, the Post had 50,000 shares. By morning, it had fractured along every fault line it touched: grief, race, inheritance law, corporate power, a widow and a 4-year-old left with nothing while a billion-dollar family laughed, journalists, legal commentators, Korean-American community advocates, women's rights organizations. The comments filled with women who said this happened to me, and men who said I don't believe it, and lawyers who said actually, here's what the law says, and all of it kept spreading, kept moving, the way truth does when it finally gets enough air. James's phone rang at 1 a.m., Hyun-ja Seo. He answered on speaker. She offered $500,000, full confidentiality, walk away clean. James said no before she finished the sentence. Then she offered Maya directly. Sign over all rights to Daniel's estate, accept supervised visitation with Soo-Yeon, receive a monthly stipend. The custody petition disappears. Supervised visitation, Maya said, with my own daughter. She is also a CO. Hyun-ja's voice was precise as ever. Then something shifted in it, a hairline fracture barely audible. Maya, I am dying. The room went quiet. Stomach cancer, they are saying 8 months, perhaps less. A pause. I wanted Soo-Yeon to know where she comes from. Her grandfather's language, her father's culture. Before I am no longer here to give it to her. Maya looked at the stars still moving slowly on the ceiling above, visible through the open door. Legacy doesn't survive death, she said quietly. Love does. And I am raising a daughter who will know her father chose love over every single thing your family offered him. Hyun-ja didn't respond. The line went dead. James was already at the laptop, the USB drive open, scrolling through audio files they hadn't reached yet. He found one time-stamped 3 weeks before Daniel died and pressed play. 2 voices, Jae-won and Chairman Seo. The chairman's voice was cold and unhurried, the voice of a man issuing instructions he expects to be followed without discussion. Daniel has made his choice. He has put everything at risk. Handle it, Jae-won, before this gets worse. The recording ended. James looked at Maya. Neither of them said the word. They didn't need to. It was already sitting between them on the table, plain and irrefutable, waiting for someone with the authority to act on it. The cameras found her before she reached the top step. Maya walked through them the way Daniel had taught her to walk through rooms that didn't want her, chin level, Eyes forward, the particular posture of someone who has decided that the space belongs to them regardless of what the room thinks. On her right hand, a pearl ring found at the bottom of the lockbox, small and ivory white, engraved on the inner band in characters so small she'd needed James's phone light to read them. Korean. He had translated it quietly. "You are enough." She was wearing it today. At the top of the steps, the SEO family waited. A wall of dark suits and composed expressions. Chairman Seo absent, his lawyers present in his place, which somehow communicated more authority than his presence would have. Hyun-ja stood slightly apart, thinner than she'd looked at the will reading, her face arranged into something neutral and permanent. She didn't look at Maya. Inside, Judge Mina Park entered without ceremony. Korean-American, silver-haired, 60-something, with the kind of face that had stopped performing patience decades ago and now simply possessed it. Maya felt something lift slightly in her chest. It didn't last. Christine. O, the SEO family's attorney, was polished in the way that costs a great deal of money and takes years to perfect. She presented the case without raised voice or visible contempt, which made it worse. No income, no fixed address. In a viral social media post exposing a 4-year-old child to international attention. Missed pediatric appointments, bank statements in the red, and a series of increasingly serious public accusations against a prominent grieving family, unsupported by verified evidence. She laid the screenshots on the table like cards in a hand she already knew she'd won. Then James presented theirs, the trust documents, the patent trail, Daniel's journal, the audio recording, the chairman's voice filling the wood-paneled courtroom with its flat, irrevocable instruction. "Handle it, Jae-won, before this gets worse." The room went completely still. Judge Park listened to it twice. Then she set down her pen, folded her hands, and called it serious. Called it alarming. Said the recording, if authentic, warranted immediate investigation. And then she ruled against Maya. The evidence was unverified. The chain of custody was unclear. A USB drive of unknown origin, obtained during what the opposing counsel characterized as an illegal trespass. The recordings could be fabricated. Mrs. Seo-Carter had demonstrated erratic public behavior. The child's stability required immediate protection while the allegations were properly investigated. 30-day temporary custody order granted to Hyun-ja Seo. Supervised visitation, 4 hours per week. Psychological evaluation to be completed before the next hearing. The gavel fell. Maya didn't move. Couldn't move. The sound of it seemed to travel through the bench, through the floor, up through the soles of her feet, and into the center of her chest where it sat, heavy and final. In the back of the courtroom, Soo-yeon was sitting with Doctor. The legs dangling from a wooden chair too large for her, looking at her mother with an expression that was trying very hard to understand what the sound of the gavel meant. Maya looked back at her and kept her face still. Jae-won's chair was already empty. She hadn't seen him leave. Then James's phone buzzed. He looked down. His expression shifted, not dramatically, just a slight stillness that she'd learned to read as significant. He turned the screen toward her. Breaking. Jae-won Seo, heir to Seo Corporation fortune, reported missing. Last seen leaving Seoul District Courthouse. Police have been notified. Maya stared at the screen. He was running, which meant he knew what was coming, which meant there was something still coming. The text arrived while they were still sitting in the courthouse conference room, and neither of them speaking. Unknown number. A video file. No message attached. Maya stared at it for a long moment. Her thumb hovered. James noticed and leaned over, and something in his expression, not urgency, just steadiness, made her press play. A hospital room, white walls, the particular institutional stillness of late-night wards. The timestamp burned into the lower corner. 11:47 p.m. The night Daniel died. The door opened. Jae-won entered. He checked the hallway behind him first, a quick, practiced look, then let the door close and crossed the room to the bed where Daniel lay, bandaged, motionless, attached to monitors that marked each breath with a soft, steady tone. Jae-won stood over him for a moment. Then he spoke quietly, the way you speak in hospitals. "I'm sorry it came to this. But you wouldn't stop." He reached into his jacket, a syringe. Maya's hand went to her mouth. On the screen, Daniel's eyes opened. Barely, just a fractured line of consciousness. Enough. His voice was a rasp pulled up from somewhere very deep. "Jae-won." Jae-won paused, then kept moving. "Father said it had to be done. For the company. For the family." "What are you—" Daniel tried to move. His hand shot out and caught his brother's wrist. The syringe fell, skittered across the floor. They struggled, Daniel barely able, pulling with everything left in a body that had very little left. The monitors accelerated. The steady tone became urgent. Then Daniel gasped. His hand released. Reached outward instead. Open, desperate, the gesture of someone asking for help from whoever was close enough to give it. Jae-won stepped back. He didn't call for help. Didn't reach back. Just stood and watched with an expression that wasn't monstrous, which somehow made it worse. It was tired, like a decision already made and now simply completing itself. When the nurses rushed in 30 seconds later, Jae-won was already at the door. He didn't run. He walked out. The video ended. The conference room was absolutely silent. Then a second message arrived from the same number. "My name is Sun-hee. I was Daniel's research assistant for 3 years. The week before he died, he asked me to install a camera in his hospital room. He said if anything happened to him, I should send the footage to his wife. I'm sorry it took me this long. I was afraid. I'm not anymore." James was already on his phone. He called the DA's office directly, not an assistant, not a voicemail. He had a name. But a direct line, and the particular tone of a man presenting something that cannot be ignored. He sent the video, the audio recordings, the financial trail, and Sun-hee's written statement in a single encrypted transfer. 90 minutes later, the warrants were issued. Jae-won was located at a private airfield 20 miles outside the city. He surrendered without resistance, his attorney present, a plea negotiation already forming before the handcuffs were on. His confession, given in exchange for consideration on sentencing, named his father as the architect of everything. Chairman Seo Byung-il was arrested at his home at 6 p.m. The second warrant had his name on it. Maya's phone rang an hour after that. Hyunja. She almost didn't answer. Then she did. The voice on the other end was barely recognizable, stripped of its precision, in its expensive composure, everything that had made it a weapon. "He was my son, too." A long silence. "I told my husband to handle it, to stop Daniel from— I never said—" She stopped, couldn't finish or wouldn't. "I didn't know Jae-won would go that far." Maya said nothing. Another silence. Longer. "I am sorry." Maya hung up. She sat with the phone in her lap and looked at the pearl ring on her finger. Outside the window, the city continued as if nothing had shifted. But everything had shifted. The custody order would be dissolved by morning. James had already made that call. Soo-yeon was coming home. 6 months later, the estate smelled like cedar and cinnamon, and the particular kind of mess that means a place is genuinely lived in. Maya's paintings covered the walls, the originals Daniel had recovered and framed, and new ones beside them, made in the months since, larger and less careful, the work of someone painting without an audience, for the first time in years. Soo-yeon's drawings were pinned between them with no hierarchy, crayon birds beside oil abstracts, because Maya had decided early that this house would not rank its art. Outside, the oak trees had gone amber and gold. Inside, something was baking. an old recipe of Daniel's grandmother that Soo-yeon had demanded Maya learn, and Maya was still, imperfectly, learning. Chairman Seo Byung-il was convicted in September. Conspiracy to commit murder. 18 years, no early consideration. Jae-won received 22. The confession had bought him a ceiling, not a floor. The SEO Corporation was placed under court-supervised restructuring, its board dissolved, its charitable foundations audited. Everything the family had called a legacy was being taken apart and examined in the light. Hyun-ja was too ill to stand trial. She was placed under house arrest in the family home, where she remained, by all accounts, alone. Maya didn't follow the updates closely. She had made her peace with the fact that some people die inside their choices long before their bodies do. The custody petition had been dissolved the morning the arrest warrants were issued, before Maya even had to fight it again. Judge Mina Park sent a formal written apology 2 weeks later. 4 paragraphs, careful and undefensive, acknowledging that the court had failed Maya Seo-Carter by allowing assumption to stand in for evidence. Maya read it once, folded it, and placed it in the lockbox beside Daniel's letter. She didn't need it. But Soo-yeon might someday. Proof that institutions could be wrong and still eventually say so. The Daniel Seo-Carter Foundation held its first session in October. Twice a week, the estate's lower floor filled with children, ages 5 to 12, mostly from immigrant families in the surrounding neighborhoods, many of whom had never held a paintbrush with any seriousness or been told that what they made with their hands could matter. They painted. They carved small things from soft wood. They made noise and left trails of sawdust and argued about colors with the passionate certainty of people who have not yet learned to second-guess themselves. Soo-yeon sat at the small desk with her name burned into it and drew birds. Always birds, in every session, in every medium, crayon, watercolor, charcoal. Maya had stopped asking why. And some things didn't need explaining. Some things were just how grief and love decided to share a body. Sun-hee came on a Tuesday, nervous, a thermos of barley tea in both hands like an offering. Maya opened the door and stepped aside without a word. They sat on the porch while the foundation kids worked inside, the sound of them drifting out through the windows, laughter, a minor argument, someone's paintbrush hitting the floor. "He talked about you every day," Sun-hee said eventually. "Showed me your paintings on his phone. Said you were the bravest person he knew." Maya laughed, a real laugh, the kind that arrives without permission, full and unguarded, the kind she had not heard from herself in so long it felt like meeting someone she used to know. "He was wrong about a lot of things," she said, "but not that." That evening, after Soo-yeon was asleep, Maya went to the workshop alone. She ran her hand along the workbench, feeling the tool marks, the deliberate imperfections, the grain of wood shaped by someone who loved her. She picked up a chisel, sat down, and carved. Not for the foundation, not for Soo-yeon, not for anyone who would ever see it. For herself. A small wooden figure took shape under her hands. A woman standing upright, one hand extended forward, one hand open at her side, not reaching, not defending, just open, ready. She set it on the shelf beside Daniel's photograph. "We did it, baby," she whispered into the quiet workshop. "Not the way I wanted, but we're still here, still building." She looked at the pearl ring on her finger. "You are enough," and she believed it now, not because he had written it inside a ring and hidden it in a lockbox for her to find, but because she had walked into that conference room with $20 and walked out with the truth, because she had run through dark woods clutching evidence of her husband's love, because she had sat in a courtroom and lost and gotten back up anyway, because she had pressed post when her hands were shaking and told the truth when silence would have been so much easier. She believed it because she had proven it. From upstairs, a small voice drifted down. "Mama, I need water." Maya stood. turned off the workshop light. The room stayed warm behind her, full of everything Daniel had built and everything she was building from here. Some men fight loud. But Maya Seo-Carter fought in blueprints and patents and a check written in code. He knew they would come for everything, so he made sure there was more love than they could ever take, and she made sure they knew it. If you stayed with Maya through all of it, the $20 check, the estate in the woods, the courtroom, the video, the long way back, thank you. Stories like this one exist because people like you believe they matter. If this story moved something in you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that love is not fragile, that the people who underestimate you are writing the first chapter of your comeback, that $20 and the truth and a mother who refuses to stop. That is enough to bring an empire down. Subscribe for more stories about the ones who were counted out and refused to stay there. Your story isn't over. Neither is theirs.